The storm hadn't let up in hours. The glass of the penthouse windows shuddered under the wind, and the lights of Tokyo blinked beneath me like some dying constellation. I watched it all in silence, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in my hand. My name is Roman Belgrave, 48 years old, CEO of Belgrave Global Security. But that title barely scratched the surface. Before this, I was nothing. A street rat. A nobody. No family. No future. Just a name and a mean streak. I earned everything I had the hard way, through blood, strategy, and brutal precision. Once, I was the man people feared in alleyways and backrooms. An enforcer for underground syndicates in Manila, Bangkok, Jakarta. I was the one who handled things when negotiations failed. But I didn't just muscle my way through life. I studied it, calculated every move like a chessboard. Tactical brilliance, they used to call it. I climbed the ladder one severed tie at a time until I had something resembling power. And then, I met Marissa Langford. She was all elegance and chill diplomacy. A former U.S. diplomat from a family of senators and shadow deals. She saw something in me that even I didn't yet see: stability, control, empire. I saw in her what I lacked: legitimacy, image, access. When we married, it wasn't just love. It was alignment. Her pedigree, my muscle. Together, we became untouchable. Julian was born 2 years later, and in him, the plan came full circle. A fluent French speaker by 7, chess tournaments by 9, and now at 13, fluent in 5 languages and better at reading body language than most of my lieutenants. A true hybrid, my steel with Marissa's polish. But tonight, the rain didn't feel like peace. It felt like warning. I sat in the penthouse library, the security feeds looping silently on the wall-mounted screen. Tokyo was only one of 6 capitals where we had regional headquarters. My empire was vast, silent, invisible unless I wanted it otherwise. And yet, here I was paranoid, restless. It had started 3 weeks ago. A meeting in London, Marissa said, was about a UN cultural initiative. The next week, she had dinner in Dubai with Kai Donovan, my second-in-command. My protégé. The one man I trusted to carry out missions blindfolded, buried in 6 layers of plausible deniability. My right hand. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I watched. I listened. Kai and Marissa kept their stories clean, but something was off. A delay here. A new number in her encrypted contacts. A change in Kai's language when he briefed me. Then last night, the Tokyo Intel office flagged a file. Marissa's secondary comms line had been bouncing through a secure channel in Zurich. Kai's name was flagged in the same window. I stared at the screen again. The two of them, seated across from each other at a discreet wine bar in Geneva last week. No handlers. No visible security. No need for pretense. There's only one reason my wife and my ops chief would be meeting in secret in Switzerland. They were plotting something. Against me. The rage didn't come all at once. It settled low in my stomach like a thick weight. Betrayal wasn't foreign to me. I just never expected it to come from inside my own walls. I turned off the screen and picked up my phone. Yasmin, I said. Activate Tier 3. Full surveillance. All notes. I want eyes on Kai and Marissa 24/7. Understood, Yasmin replied, calm as ever. Former MI6, and loyal only to me. I stared into the glass again, watching the city's pulse below. You want to play games? Let's begin. 3 days later, we met at the lakeside compound in Hokkaido. Snow clung to the pine trees like icing, the private road lined with armed staff in plain black coats. From the outside, it looked like a leadership retreat. Inside, it was a controlled environment, monitored, swept, locked tight. I didn't want surprises. Kai arrived first, dressed in tactical gray, his expression unreadable. He offered his usual firm handshake. Good to see you, Roman, he said, like nothing had shifted. Likewise, I replied, giving nothing away. Marissa's en route. She arrived 20 minutes later in a cream wool coat and gloves, hair pinned back like she was about to moderate a peace summit. Her kiss on my cheek lingered half a second too long, just enough to look normal, not enough to mean anything. Dinner was held in the smaller hall overlooking the frozen lake. Fire crackled in the hearth. We had Wagyu beef flown in, paired with a Chianti I knew Kai liked. All of it choreographed, polished, comfortable. I let them talk at first, Kai with his briefings on the shifting political tensions in Warsaw, Marissa with her insight on upcoming diplomatic shifts in Brussels. The perfect power couple, minus the honesty. Then I made my move. Let's talk succession, I said, setting down my glass. The air shifted. They both paused. I've been considering restructuring. A decentralized model. More autonomy. Less dependence on one note. Kai tilted his head. You're stepping back? Delegating, I said. Europe needs stronger operational direction. I want you to run it. Marissa blinked. All of it. Field ops, logistics, cyber, all of it. I kept my eyes on Kai. I want a full transition plan by end of quarter. Kai leaned back slowly, masking the hunger in his eyes with a professional nod. That's a significant shift. It's trust, I said. You've earned it. Marissa touched her wine glass, then looked up. That's a big move, Roman. Are you sure he's ready? That was rich, coming from her. I wouldn't offer it if I wasn't, I said. The rest of dinner went as expected. They accepted, cautiously. Kai offered the right amount of humility, mixed with visible excitement. Marissa chimed in with her usual political tact. But I could see it, the way her eyes flicked to him when I wasn't speaking, the way he subtly adjusted his posture when she spoke. I had them. Hooked. Back in my private study, I handed Kai a sealed envelope. Preliminary contract, I said. Nothing formal until the board signs off, but legal wanted you to review the initial structure. He nodded, tucking it into his coat. He didn't know that Clause 7.3, buried in the subtext, triggered a full asset forfeiture if internal trust was breached. Yasmin Rowe drafted it herself, buried in the dense language of moral conduct and leadership integrity. Later that night, Yasmin called me from our covert office in Osaka. Data sync is active, she said. We've deployed node spiders to their devices. Marissa's alt phone just pinged from Luxembourg. Let it run, I said. I want everything. You planning a quiet fallout? No, I said. I'm planning the performance of a lifetime. Let them rise. Let them taste it. The fall is only theatrical when it starts from high enough. The villa in Spain was nestled in a private olive grove outside Girona, quiet, secluded, and ironically, owned by one of my own shell corporations. A vacation rental for elites who liked silence and discretion. Marissa and Kai thought they were being clever. They weren't. Every Friday, like clockwork, they arrived in separate vehicles, one always 30 minutes ahead of the other. Our drones tracked them from the moment they exited the Barcelona terminal. Yasmin's team patched into the villa's security system weeks ago. Every room, every whisper, streamed to a Cold War-era data center I owned in the Pyrenees. That Friday, I watched in silence from my Tokyo office as Marissa lit a cigarette on the terrace when brushing her hair. She hadn't smoked in years. Kai joined her a few minutes later. They stood close. No touching, just words. Intentional. Calculated. The audio wasn't perfect at first, wind interference, but Yasmin's filters cleaned it up within minutes. And when I heard the word, unstable, come out of Marissa's mouth, I felt the last piece of doubt snap. Roman's slipping, she said, exhaling smoke. He's paranoid. Pulling resources back from the Baltic corridor. That's not strategy, it's fear. Kai responded quietly. He's too tied to legacy ops. If we wait much longer, the board's going to see it too. Marissa stepped closer. I've already opened a secondary trust in Zurich. Everything we talked about, it's in motion. I sat back in my chair, watching my wife and my second-in-command outline my erasure like they were planning a garden renovation. Marissa mentioned offshore movements, asset filters. Kai dropped names, 2 board members they believed would pivot if the narrative was right. I didn't react. I'd trained myself out of that years ago. Instead, I made a call. Roland, I said to my lawyer in Geneva, run a quiet trace on a new holding trust tied to Marissa Langford. Use indirect leads, look for proxies in Zurich. Cross-reference with her maiden family accounts. Roland didn't ask questions. He never did. Yasmin handed me a drive later that night. Here's the digest. Video, audio, metadata, plus every flagged keyword in the transcripts. I plugged it into the penthouse projector. For an hour, I sat in the dark, watching 2 people I had built everything with discuss the best way to unseat me, like a boardroom rehearsal with sex and espionage folded into the margins. By dawn, I had my plan. I drafted a confidential memo to the executive board titled Transition Restructure and Succession Protocols. Attached were preliminary documents framing Kai as an outgoing asset due to internal instability and policy breaches. Nothing definitive, just enough to plant seeds. Enough to let them start asking questions. Yasmin added her own touch, an anonymous leak of Kai's recent encrypted communications to our legal counsel's inbox. If anyone asked, it looked like a disgruntled insider trying to play whistleblower. I wasn't just preparing a counterstrike, I was setting the stage for a spectacle. By the time the dust settled, they wouldn't just be exposed. They'd be radioactive. I poured a coffee and glanced at the clock. Julian would be up soon. He had chess at noon. We always played before his matches. He didn't know what was coming, but one day he would. And when that day came, he'd understand the lesson I'd built my entire empire on. Trust is currency. And betrayal? That's just bad investment. Vienna. The Winter Security Convention. It was always held in the same sleek glass tower off Kartner Strasse, where dignitaries, tech giants, and private military heads swapped visions of global control over shrimp cocktail and softly humming jazz. This year, Belgrave Global Security was hosting the main keynote. Kai Donovan was scheduled to speak. The topic? Operational integrity in a fragmented world. Irony thick enough to drown in. I arrived 2 hours early with Julian in tow. He wore a navy suit and his mother's quiet posture. At 13, he had already memorized the seating chart and guest list. He sat in the observation suite behind the boardroom, I scanning the security feeds like a junior analyst. I made sure he had a direct line into everything. This wasn't just a board meeting. It was theater. At precisely 10 a.m., I entered the main hall flanked by Yasmin Rowe and 2 legal officers. The Belgrave board sat waiting 8 members, all wearing that subtle blend of concern and curiosity that usually signaled blood in the water. Kai stood near the center podium, half smile on his face, documents in hand. Marissa sat to the side in a tailored gray suit, playing her usual game of neutral detachment. Kai, I said warmly, before you begin, I'd like to address the board directly. He hesitated just a breath. Of course. I turned to the panel. In the interest of transparency, I began. I've instructed our cyber team to conduct a routine audit on all leadership terminals. A precaution, given recent digital security incidents in our Warsaw office. Murmurs. Yasmin stepped forward and placed a tablet on the table. We found a breach, I continued. Significant. And internal. With a swipe, she pulled up the first video. It played silently at first. Kai's laptop, open in the Spanish villa, Marissa perched beside him. Then, overlaid audio clear. Undeniable. If we move the Warsaw files into the Zurich container, Roman won't notice until it's too late. Another swipe. A screen recording. Confidential client data being duplicated, labeled under false identifiers. Then the contract. Projected in crisp white against the black glass wall. Clause 7.3. Moral breach. Operational betrayal. Total forfeiture. I turned to Kai. Effective immediately, your shares are revoked. Travel privileges rescinded. Digital access terminated. Your position is dissolved under internal enforcement code. The room went still. Kai looked around, his mouth slightly open. Roman, this is insane. You. Yasmin held up a finger. The footage is timestamped and verified. The Zurich assets were moved with your credentials. And the betrayal, I said, was sealed with more than just your signature. Marissa stood abruptly. Wait, this is a mistake. This isn't how we handle internal disputes. No, I said calmly, this is how we handle treason. She stepped forward. Roman, we can talk about this. We can resolve. Your diplomatic passport, I interrupted, has been flagged for review. Your immunity has lapsed, thanks to a series of quiet conversations I had with the Langford Foundation and the State Department last week. She blinked. You always said connections were power, I said. So I rerouted yours. Julian watched it all unfold on the screen from behind bulletproof glass. I had arranged the angle myself. He saw his mother's jaw tremble. He saw Kai trying to shout, only for the guards to close in around him. He saw me calm, unblinking, exact. And in that moment, I knew what he saw wasn't cruelty. It was control. After Kai and Marissa were escorted out of the hall, the board remained silent. Then came a slow, solitary clap from Sophia Merrill, one of our oldest directors. Well played, Roman, she said. I nodded once and turned toward the exit. As I walked back to the suite, Julian met me at the door. Was it all true? He asked. I looked him in the eye. It doesn't matter. He didn't blink. I know. That night, over dinner, Julian didn't say much. But as he cleared his plate, he asked, if you knew about them this whole time, why wait? I answered honestly. Because timing is everything. Revenge too early looks petty. Done right, it becomes justice. Singapore Family Court is a quiet battlefield, white walls, soft lighting, and a ruthless sense of order. No drama, no shouting, just paper, precedent, and precision. I didn't want theatrics. I wanted results. The custody battle lasted 6 days. Marissa came in wearing her old diplomatic smile, tailored suit immaculate, as pleading in all the right directions. Her lawyers spoke of international schooling, maternal instinct, emotional balance. She spoke of me as volatile, unyielding, manipulative. I didn't argue. I didn't even raise my voice. Yasmin handed over our file, flight logs, transcripts, surveillance clips, some muted, some not. Proof of deceit, proof of collusion, proof of endangerment. But the final blow came from Julian himself. He had requested to speak, privately, to the judge. I let him. He emerged 10 minutes later, quiet but firm. I never asked what he said. I didn't have to. The court ruled in my favor. Full custody. No appeals. Outside the courthouse, Marissa confronted me on the steps. "You're poisoning him," she said, barely keeping her voice from cracking. "He's a child, Roman. He needs balance. He needs both of us." I looked her straight in the eye. "He needs the truth." She laughed once, dry and bitter. "You're punishing me because I didn't play by your rules." "No," I said. "I'm punishing you because you thought there were no consequences." That night, I took Julian out to a rooftop restaurant overlooking Marina Bay. He was quiet at first, pushing grilled sea bass around with his fork. Then he said it. I knew. I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "I saw the messages," he added. "A few months ago." I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure if I wanted to. I watched him closely. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid of what you'd do," he said. Then, softer. "And because it reminded me of how you used to talk about your own father. How he lied. How he made you feel small." My hand stilled. "I didn't want to be the reason someone got destroyed," he added. I nodded once. "You weren't. They destroyed themselves. I just made it public." He didn't reply, but he didn't walk away, either. In the weeks that followed, the demolition continued, methodical, legal, and absolute. Marissa's trust was emptied within 31 days. Every affiliated financial institution severed ties. With her reputation shattered and no fallback contacts willing to touch her, she faded into the diplomatic graveyard. She now worked for a third-tier NGO in Chile, advocating for agricultural reform, noble but toothless. Kai disappeared. Rumors placed him in Eastern Europe, operating under a different name. Private militias. Night raids. No headlines. No trace. I didn't hunt him. I didn't have to. I moved our headquarters to Geneva. A symbol, not just a strategy. Neutral ground. Unassailable position. Clean architecture for the empire's next phase. Julian took to his new school with ease. Swiss efficiency suited him. He made few friends, but observed everyone. Always listening, always watching. Like someone preparing for a future only he could see. One night, as I checked security feeds from my Geneva office, I saw him sitting by the lake, sketching. A quiet outline of the villa in Spain. Our scar. I didn't disturb him. He needed to remember. Because forgetting isn't survival. Remembering is. Julian turned 22 in silence. No party. No cake. Just a dinner at a quiet restaurant in Zurich, the kind that didn't take walk-ins and only addressed guests by last name. We sat by the window, overlooking the Limmat River. He looked older, sharper, like someone who'd been watching the game long enough to start playing it himself. Halfway through the meal, he set down his fork and looked at me. I saw her. I didn't ask who. I already knew. "In Chile," he added. "Marissa. I flew in on my own last week." That name. He said it like a reporter, not a son. "She's different," he continued. "Thinner. Wears her hair up all the time. Works out of a metal trailer. Doesn't ask about you." I sipped my wine. "And she told me everything." I didn't flinch. Julian leaned forward. "You didn't just destroy her. You made sure she couldn't rise again. No contacts. No leverage. You made sure no one credible would ever touch her name." I met his gaze. "She earned that." She told me about Zurich. About the surveillance. About how early it started. "You were watching her long before she ever crossed the line." "Prevention," I said. "Not punishment." Julian shook his head. "You had a file on her before she even opened the trust." "And on you," I added evenly. He froze. His fingers curled slightly on the table. "You've been recording my movements?" "Since you were 15, I said. "Phone logs. Network behavior. Friendships. Tutors. Everything." "Why?" His voice was low. "Because you're the successor," I said. "Because I needed to know what kind of man I was building." He looked like he wanted to punch the table. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "Then here's your report." "I'm walking." I nodded once. "Toward what?" "I'm supporting her," he said. "Not because I excuse what she did, but because I don't want to become you." I stared at him. Then you forfeit everything. He blinked. What? The inheritance. The structures. The company. The trust. All of it. You walk with her, you walk without it. That's not a decision, he said, voice rising. That's blackmail. No, I said. That's legacy. He stood, threw his napkin onto the table. You tracked me. You manipulated me. You built traps into every piece of our lives. And now you expect me to thank you for letting me leave with nothing. I expect you to choose, I said calmly. He stared at me, breath uneven. And then, without a word, he walked out of the restaurant. I didn't stop him. Julian wasn't a boy anymore. He was a man with a spine. And like all men forged in conflict, he had to learn the cost of standing on his own. I paid the check in silence. Outside, the wind was sharp, cold. I turned my coat collar up and walked toward the waiting car. He had made his move. Now it was my turn. The summons arrived on a Tuesday morning. I had just finished reviewing an arms contract renegotiation when Yasmin entered my office, a manila envelope in her hand, and that rare flicker of tension behind her eyes. It's from Julian, she said quietly, setting it on the desk. I opened it. Legal language, precise formatting. International jurisdiction. Filed through a shell firm in Luxembourg, with parallel actions in Hong Kong and London. He'd done his homework. Julian Belgrave versus Roman Belgrave. Cause: psychological coercion, disinheritance by manipulation, unlawful surveillance. Claim: full revocation of succession protocols, restitution of controlled assets, and damages. I read it twice. Then a third time. The boy had declared war. I leaned back in my chair, heart slow, thoughts sharp. Who's backing him? I asked without looking up. Yasmin tapped the final page. We traced the financing channels. Offshore accounts tied to a shell that's ultimately funded by two known arms syndicates. Venezuelan and Ukrainian origin. Of course. The scavengers. Smelling blood. Activate Protocol Black, I said calmly. She didn't flinch. All of it. All of it. Protocol Black wasn't a plan. It was a trap. One I had built over a decade ago, in anticipation of betrayal, not from enemies, but from blood. A father's final lesson. A failsafe. Over the next 72 hours, my legal teams in 6 countries countered with coordinated motions. Proof of Julian's active financial entanglements with hostile entities. His unauthorized access to private systems during his teenage years. A psychologist's affidavit, commissioned years prior, noting signs of narcissistic rebellion and susceptibility to external influence. I didn't need to win in court. I needed to stall, discredit, bleed him in motion fees. But that wasn't the real move. The real move came buried in the Belgrave Trust documents, Trusts A, B, and C, each set to release incrementally at milestones in Julian's adult life. One of them had a condition, a silent clause added by our Zurich legal team. In the event that the beneficiary initiates hostile legal action against the primary trustee, Roman Belgrave, control of all assets under Trust C will be immediately and irrevocably transferred to said beneficiary, including operational liabilities, outstanding legal exposure, and assumed risk portfolios. Julian, by attacking me, had triggered full ownership. Everything was now his. But not just the clean assets, not just the titles and logos. He now owned every covert facility, every off-book operation, every intelligence contract and deniable asset tied to the Belgrave name, every shady client we had ever protected, every secret we had ever stored, and every legal risk that came with it. I watched the news that evening. Private security empire faces internal upheaval. Julian Belgrave acquires full control amid lawsuit drama. He didn't know it yet, but by trying to burn me, he had become me. Yasmin walked in as I poured a drink. He's hired a French firm to stabilize the corporate perimeter. Ex-Mossad types. Thinks he's taking control. He is, I said, sipping. But not the way he thinks. She nodded slowly. You win, then? No, I said. He does. That was always the plan. She frowned. You wanted him to attack you? I wanted him to become someone who could. I looked out the window. If Julian thought he had forced my hand, he hadn't understood yet. This wasn't about control. This was about weight. About burden. I'd carried the fire. Now it was his turn to burn. Julian assumed control in late autumn. The Belgrave security crest was repainted across our Geneva headquarters. New executive signatures filed in every jurisdiction within 2 weeks. Press releases called it a natural transition of leadership. The world believed it. Investors held steady. Internally, it was chaos. The first threat came within 9 days, a coordinated phishing attack on the Zurich cyber node. It failed, barely, but it was a signal. The hyenas were circling. Julian responded with speed and arrogance. He fired half the compliance team, called it a streamlining initiative. He moved headquarters into a decentralized model and relocated his primary operations office to a classified black site in Iceland. I didn't reach out. I only watched. Then came the first assassination attempt. It happened in Dubai, outside our Gulf Division's compound. Julian's convoy was hit by a targeted IED hidden in a maintenance drone. His lead driver died on impact. Julian survived, pulled from the wreckage by an ex-Georgian bodyguard. He didn't retreat. Instead, he hired a new team, former Russian GRU cyber specialists, one Chilean counterintelligence officer, and 2 men whose backgrounds were so blacklisted even Yasmin had to call in favors just to get a trace. He cut off 6 board members, sent encrypted cease and desist orders to 2 ex-clients suspected of organizing the hit. He moved like a warlord disguised as an executive, efficient, cold, furious. But it came at a cost. In 8 weeks, Julian lost. His head of diplomatic relations walked after 2 policy disagreements. 3 regional leads resigned citing extreme management pressure. His personal security chief, dead in Prague, car bomb, no suspects. By Christmas, he was down 10 pounds, visibly exhausted, pale in photos. Still, he pressed forward. I watched the reports trickle in. He brokered a new surveillance contract with a Southeast Asian government. He stabilized our Eastern European operations by reinstating a brutal policy I had once shelved as inhuman but effective. He dismantled a rogue mercenary faction operating under the Belgrave name in Nigeria, personally signing off on the black bag team that executed the raid. He had become a machine. Yasmin, watching with me one evening, asked, "Is this what you wanted?" "No," I said, "but it's what he needed." She didn't argue. One night, alone in my Alpine cabin, I watched footage from our Geneva security cams. Julian was in the boardroom, hunched over the table, hands trembling. The room was empty except for him and a decanter of whiskey, half empty. He looked nothing like the boy I'd raised, and everything like the man I'd been. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then put it down. Didn't call. Didn't ask for help. Didn't surrender. I turned off the feed. Julian had inherited the throne not through love or celebration, but by war. He had defended it through blood, endured the trial I knew would one day come. He had made decisions that would haunt him, ordered things that would strip whatever innocence he had left. And he had survived. Barely. I poured myself a drink. To anyone else, it might have looked like I was absent, that I had withdrawn, that I had handed over the empire and walked away. But I had never stopped watching. Because real power doesn't sit in the chair. It watches the chair and waits for the next storm. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years. Not face to face. There were encrypted briefings passed through Yasmin. Updates on board restructuring. Reports on regional contracts. Nothing personal. Nothing direct. Then, on a quiet spring afternoon, I got the message. He wants to see you. In person. No security. I told Yasmin to arrange the meeting in the Montreux house. Neutral ground. Tucked along Lake Geneva. Quiet. Private. The same place Marissa and I had taken Julian once when he was 6. He'd fed ducks off the dock and asked me if being in charge meant you could make the sun wait. He arrived just after 2 p.m. Julian was 25 now, taller than I remembered. Scar near his temple I hadn't seen before. Eyes sharp, shoulders heavy. He brought a bottle of bourbon, Pappy Van Winkle, the old kind. I poured us 2 glasses without saying a word. We sat by the lake as the wind picked up. Neither of us spoke for a long while. Then he said it. I had a son. I didn't look at him, just nodded slowly. He's 6 months old. We named him Roman. Still, I didn't speak. He looked out at the water. Not because I forgive you. Not because I want to honor you. But because I wanted him to know where the line started. I finally turned to face him. Does he know what the name costs? He will, Julian said, taking a slow sip. That's why I came. The silence between us shifted, no longer cold, just waited. He pulled a slim folder from his coat and handed it to me. Inside, a curriculum outline. Intelligence immersion. Situational ethics. Resilience through controlled stress environments. For phases. 18 years. He won't live soft, Julian said. But I want him to live aware. I traced the page with my finger, recognizing pieces of my old systems. Adjusted, modernized, less brutal, but just as focused. You want my help? I asked. No, he said. I want your clarity. I want him to understand power. Not fear it. Not abuse it. Just understand it, like a tool. I nodded. And when he turns on you? Julian smirked. Then I'll know I taught him well. We sat back in silence again, sipping bourbon, watching the clouds roll in over the mountains. You still blame me? I asked finally. Julian exhaled through his nose. I understand you. That's worse. I smiled faintly. You made it through the fire. He met my eyes. I'm still in it. He stood and walked to the edge of the dock, pulled out his phone, and showed me a photo. Roman 3, all wide eyes and clenched fists, staring at the camera like it owed him something. He's intense, Julian said. He's a Belgrave, I replied. He nodded. I don't need you to love him or protect him, but I need you to prepare him. The world won't wait. We stood there, two men burned and rebuilt by the same empire, finally acknowledging what we had become. Not father and son. Architects of legacy. Julian handed me the bottle. He's your second chance, he said. No, I replied, gripping it tightly. He's our third generation. He left without another word. I watched his car disappear down the long gravel path, then turned back to the folder in my hands. Roman 3. A new name, an old burden. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning again. 6 months old, and already watching the world like it owed him answers. Roman Belgrave 3 sat in a high-back chair custom-built for infants, oak frame, Kevlar-lined, surrounded by padded screens looping foreign newsreels in French, Arabic, and Mandarin. His eyes didn't wander. They tracked, followed sound, paused on movement. Not with wonder, with calculation. I'd seen that stare before. Once in a broken mirror in Manila, blood in my teeth. Once in Julian, standing over a table full of betrayal. Now, again, in a child too young to form sentences. Julian had moved into the Lausanne facility with his son. Converted the top floor into a training compound, daycare, surveillance sandbox, multilingual immersion rooms. The pediatrician came twice a week. The psychologist once a month. A Mossad consultant helped build the conditioning program. Resilience, Julian told me. Without fear. I visited once a week. No ceremony. No warm greetings. Just updates. He responds to pattern disruption, Julian said one afternoon, watching Roman 3 sweat a toy drone mid-flight. Hates repetition. Learns faster under duress. I nodded. Keep pushing. Julian didn't smile. He rarely did now. The weight of the empire sat heavier on him than it ever had on me. I built it. He inherited it. There's a difference. Then the news came. Kai Donovan dead. Found outside Sarajevo. 2 bullets in the chest. No ID. Fingerprints burned. But Yasmin confirmed it, our last living traitor, finally erased by hands unknown. I waited for Julian to bring it up. He didn't. 3 days later, I found the printed article in his trash. Folded cleanly. Unread. Nothing to say? I asked. He looked up from his laptop. Nothing to mourn. We were in the mountain retreat near Zermatt, where the signal jammers kept the place silent. No calls. No emails. Just the snow and the two of us. That night, after Roman 3 had gone quiet in his sleeping capsule, Julian sat across from me by the fire. I found one of his old recordings, he said. Kai. Julian nodded. It was in the old secure node in Cyprus. A backup file. He'd made it right after you cut him loose. I didn't ask what it said. He warned me, Julian continued. Said you were always playing the long game. That I was just a piece you sacrificed to solidify control. Did you believe him? I asked. Julian stared into the flames. I didn't listen to it. He reached into the fireplace and tossed a sealed USB drive into the coals. Watched it melt. You're sure? I asked. Julian turned to me. I don't need history lessons from dead men. I poured us both a drink. We didn't toast. There was no need. That act, burning the tape, was the final contract. Not written. Not spoken. Just done. Outside, the wind howled through the trees like something ancient warning us of the price. Inside, we sat in silence, 2 architects of a kingdom built on surveillance, betrayal, and control, finally at peace with what we were. Roman 3 stirred once in the next room, then went quiet again. Julian didn't flinch. I closed my eyes, just for a moment. The boy was ready. Or he would be. He had the name. He had the blood. And now he had the full weight of our empire pressing into his spine. No weakness. No forgiveness. No surrender. The legacy was sealed. Forever.